Welcome to Season 3.
In this tradition unlike any other.
Welcome back, ladies and gents, to another installment of the Business Culture Podcast. As always, it's wonderful to have you along. In this week's episode, we have a fantastic guest in the form of Mark Wernich, General Manager of the TAJ Hotel in Cape Town. Mark has enjoyed an illustrious career in the hospitality industry, learning from many different environments, as well as steering his team through a very testing COVID period. We're going to unpack some of those learnings and stories, and I hope you find great value from the episode. First of all, I just wanted to say thanks very much for being on the podcast. I think it's always interesting when you work with people. You'd love to get a bit more time with them and understand a little bit about the story and the learnings. And we've had a little bit of time to be able to do that. But for the sake of the podcast, I've been really excited to interview you and just hear a bit more about the story. Especially given the fact that we've just gone through quite an interesting period in, I guess, your career and in many others' careers, given what COVID did. But we always love to start with a little bit of an executive summary, if you would, of kind of what the journey's been like up until now. You've had a wonderful career so far and some great experience to draw on. So we just like to tap into that to start things off and just get a little bit of a summary of that.
When looking at that or hearing that question, it's such a long time now, 33 years. So sure. Since I started in this industry, 89, and then I went to the army. So 89, I went to work at a place, Santos Protea Hotel, on the sure. beachfront. And I got to learn what it was like to run around in the season, And so it was my, I was born into that and then realized it's something I really liked. Off I went to the army, with the promise that if I wanted to go into that industry, I can do it when I got back. Like you, I played a lot of sports. So that for me was important in the army, and I played a lot of sports. And for my sins, I went into the kitchen there, and then I started running the lieutenant's bar and the captain's bar. So I had a very good grooming in terms of hospitality. And that's, we were catering for the masses. So actually, funny enough, it was a good grounding. And then I came out and started to look like, what should I do? And I played a bit of sports for a year or so. And as I told you last time, we were in that era where we were still in the early 90s. So not much was happening for us guys at that point in time. That came about 5 years later. So I realized, look, I'm going to have to go work now. This is just how it works. And so, I took the opportunity to reach out to every single hotel in the city at the time. So imagine at that time, there's no hotels in the city, and I joined the Protea Group. I got offered an internship, and I had a great journey there. And one of the best pieces of advice was, I added on an orientation year to my year, which gave me about 4.5 years of real hands-on experience, and that just set me up for the rest of my time. Because from there, I got fast-tracked into the system of Protea, and it was a great company to do that with, because it was the number one hospitality company in South Africa at the time, and it was growing all the time. So you had wonderful opportunity in front of you if you were brave enough to work, And then from there, there was a 16-year career journey, and then obviously took the brave step to step out a little bit and run 5-star hotels, but all their services, food and beverage, housekeeping, and then I was an outsourced guy on the other side, taking the pain, So I'm being told every month, you're not so great, and that's just a price game. And so you understood how it worked, but you developed a lot of relationships. And that was what set me up for, now really growing into the South African hospitality market and knowing everybody and really coming to know my peers and developing a lot of relationships. So that was great. And then from there, I joined the Radisson Group, so also good. There were 1 or 2 short stints in between with some other prominent hoteliers that I worked for. So always working for great people, working for great companies that had a good vision, and always being put in a position that allowed me to grow. So, and being challenged all the time is also something that, I take on board. And then that found me, so at the end of the day, I've looked at only about 5 companies that I've worked for in my 33-year journey. I've been with TAJ now nearly 5 years. So, and it's going pretty quickly. And, so it's a 2-year pandemic phase, 2 year and a bit already. So Although I think we actually really came out of it late last year, albeit Omicron was put onto the scene. But I think we've literally been out of it 6 months now, just in different forms and seeing business come back. So yeah, and that's my journey. I'm at the TAJ now. I really enjoy it, pushing on in years and age and experience, and love the brand and where we position to tackle this and to go forward. So. Yeah, it's been a good journey in that sense.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've had and been with some really reputable brands in the hospitality space. I wanted to ask you in that sense, big companies like that typically have to operate in a certain way in order for them to thrive, given their size, etc. But even within that, I think you obviously learned a lot in those different environments. Is there significant differences in the way those types of hotel brands operate internally, or is it relatively similar given their size and what comes with that?
It is relatively similar. However, as we all know, that some businesses and companies have a deeper ethos towards people and their culture and the way they do things. So yeah, I think importantly they are similar, and we all work towards profitability and trying to maintain the balance of staff, people, associates, guest scores. It's a balance at the end of the day, but I think you ultimately are there for a number, and that's the measure of your success, and then ultimately the guest satisfaction and the staff satisfaction. So not always easy to juggle all of those together, but I think results are important, and all companies are measured on that. So we need to find that balance where we can be successful, and they've all been great in terms of development of people. I've seen all those companies being able to develop people, work hard on their strategy from bottom to top. So yeah, they stand out. I think where I currently am, I mean, if you take the TAJ Group and TAJ as a hotel company, it's incredibly powerful to see how they work with people. It's truly been amazing to see that journey and the human culture behind it. It's just wonderful.
Yeah,
and still results driven. That stays a focus, as I said. So. But all very similar. I must be honest. Our hotel companies all have people in the back of their mind. It's very important because we are people business. So I take my hat off to all of them for doing that.
Yeah. I'm thinking with the individual in mind who's kind of starting out their career and I guess going into the learning space as you did, where you embarked on that journey with Protea. I mean, today, I guess people are blessed with a bit more choice in terms of having either the bigger, corporate sort of environments and then the sort of smaller entity spaces. What would you say is a good way of deciding what direction is best? Is it a case of just trying to immerse yourself in as many different environments and seeing what works? Is it a personality fit thing? I mean, did you notice any types of people that were better fitted to that kind of space versus a more boutique kind of environment? Any thoughts you can share on that?
Look, in hospitality, we have quite a clear definition of food and beverage style candidates, and then we have the back of house, administrative, front office. That style is there too. So you can identify immediately what type of candidate you're looking at in the growth and development. And if you have a number of properties, you can earmark them for the right growth to obviously gain their confidence and successfully learn how to run a property. But ultimately, it can take any type of general manager to run a hotel. They can take a rooms division, they can take a finance, can take a sales manager. If the grounding is good and the period that you've taken to learn the job, you fulfill that, because that's important. You need to understand that you as an individual also have to challenge yourself to work different properties and to take on that, because every property is different. A golf resort is not a city hotel. And a weekend leisure property is also completely different. So I think the advice to the individuals is earmark where you want to be. What's your ideal kind of properties you really want to run? It's like buying your first house. You've got to tell your wife that it's not the house you're really going to live in. So, and they want to live in it immediately, the big fancy one at Val de Vie, but it can't be like that. So and I think it's the same when you take your job. You've got to know your path and your journey, and you've got to identify, I need to work a resort. Then I need to work this. I need to work a conference center. And I think in the end, then you become much more of an all-rounder, and the company is also grooming them like that, which makes sense, because you have to be the right fit for the position. If not, it's not successful for either party.
Right. Yeah, that's some great advice. And I think having that sort of worldly perspective is always going to be beneficial. You've obviously encountered your fair share of different challenges and experiences along the way. We always like to pick out maybe one or two that kind of sit in the long-term memory, as it were, that really will be on the in the book one day. So we'd love to maybe just hear one or two of them and how they transpired.
Yeah, so the Cape Townian GMs complain about the seasonality here. So we have 5 months that's winter, and I always joke with them. I say, it's always been there. So it's not actually going anywhere. It's going to be there every year. So,
Indeed.
But the garden route was the biggest challenge for me, where that did even more months. It really had very small windows of opportunity, and the West Coast was similar. So I think going to the West Coast when it was a very successful hotel, which is the Saldanha Bay Protea Hotel, it had a very established culture. The general manager had been there 10 years, and Saldanha still was feeding into the hotel, and it was just a fantastic place. And then one day that tap was turned off, and then I was called, look, can you come in and find a way to make this work? So, and people were not convinced, because they were thinking to themselves, how do we just replace it? Because who's going to go there every day of the week? Because these guys literally booked the hotel. And of course, then we had to reinvent ourselves, and you immediately faced with, digging deep, building a plan, and discovering that change is the only thing that's going to make it work. And we had to convince people to come to Saldanha Bay. And so what we did was we designed our own team building. And in the end, we were the masters of team building, and we were busing people in. We were renting the buses. We were taking all the hassle of everyone. They were just coming in for the day, but in their droves, so much so we were buying properties next door and we were extending it, But it was just the case of being challenged and saying, look, we need to find an alternative revenue stream. And we did that, and then we geared the team, we trained them, and we became professionals at that. So much so that we were doing it at other properties in the end, and we actually weren't running our own hotel anymore. But I think the garden route, when I look at all the GMs that worked there, and there was always this extra element of creativity and fighting for business, because you all fight for the same golf tournament, you all fight for the same a big conference that's coming. So everyone bids for it, and you just got to be super creative. And I think that hasn't changed in hospitality. We're always all up against each other. We're always trying to find the creative angle. So I think that was a good defining period, because it was my second property, although the first one was just as complicated. So then I was a bit known for taking some of those challenges on. And I think success, that has always set me up, that I had that agility and ability to accept change. I think it's a first mindset you have to get right. And then you have to say, well, can it be done? And then once you believe, then you've got to get the team to believe, and then you go for it, So thankfully that did work out so well, and I enjoyed it there in the end. It was nearly a 5-year stint. So, and just year on year, we got better at doing those things.
What out of that challenge do you enjoy the most? Is it the adversity? Is it the fact that it's not there on a plate for you? Is it the problem solving kind of process? I mean, a lot of people who are, I guess, more certainty driven would hate that kind of a ordeal to have to go through. Is it just something that you think is inherent to your personality, or something that you've developed along the way?
I think people who really enjoy sports and have always played sports are naturally like that, because we're used to different scenarios and a little bit different mentally and like the change. Then you get the different thinkers that don't like it to be too disruptive and like the day-to-days. So I enjoy that adversity. I enjoy the chips being down. Like the literally coming from behind type of scenario. It's nice. And I think that's important to me. It's something that must be a semi-challenge. Not always the greatest challenge, but a semi-challenge is always good, and it keeps people thinking and moving. And even if they've started becoming successful, and we have to challenge them some more, that's just the way it is.
And Mark, do you think that
I like it.
Do you think that fast forwarding a bit to our most recent adversity, do you think that from a sort of a net outcome perspective that something like COVID will render the hospitality industry more agile, in a better place to solve more problems because of the adversity faced, or do you think it'll more be a net negative in terms of what it's done for the industry at large?
I think a lot of people will keep the agility they've had to have, and some will become indispensable, and they will learn that was the important point, was to be very optimistic, be agile, and be indispensable. And if you were, then you were better set up for this period. But yes, things do return back to normal pretty quickly. So, and people forget very fast too. So I think the advice is that people should keep the agility, and they should keep it in their life. And that is quite important, to set themselves up personally for any future problems that may come. Because if you have more bows in your armory, then it's better for you as an individual too, and the company, of course, it's an ideal if you can get a lean organization that's working really strong to a common goal. But I think hospitality is pretty unique in that sense, that the guest also always dictates what we really need and want. So we need to see what the future holds in terms of how the guest perceives us being a little bit more lean in luxury, maybe, so it'll be an interesting landscape the next year. Right. Not to say it's that simple to just stay lean, and I think ideally you want to find the balance. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's, I suppose, as you're alluding to already, that's going to be a moving target that one needs to keep a very close eye on. We work a lot in this sort of environment of purpose-driven work, and how cultures are so important these days, somewhat often more important than strategy, some may argue. But, when it comes to purpose-led cultures and environments that you've been a part of, what does it mean to you in the sense of creating a purpose or a culture within an environment like the TAJ, in terms of your approach to it? Is it something that you see as a long game? Is it something that certain people in your team are tasked to drive? Is it a company-wide thing? What's your view on purpose-led work and being a purpose-driven organization like the TAJ that you oversee?
Yeah, I mean, the long game, it certainly is and should be. I think it's really about strengthening relationships in the teams with your associates and junior staff, and then ultimately your guests and your peers, your peers in the industry too. It's having good, solid foundations where you understand each other, and you have a consistent approach with each other. That is what you really want to stand for. But it is a long game, and I think your life is long and your career is long, and you want to work somewhere as long as you can. I think that's important. And this brand has people working for it for 40, 50, 60 years. And it's a 130-year-old company that is just enormous, and you can feel it in the way they speak. But it doesn't slow us down in the performance level and the quality and standard just because we say we're in it for long term. So we have to find the balance where we all want to work together long term, because that's also not the easy part. The short-term results is also required from time to time. But I think if you have that openness with the teams, and they understand the goals and where we're going, then it's a mutual partnership to get there.
Right.
But definitely a long-term strategy and has to be. And you want to help the brand build, itself in the community too. And same for yourself. You want to, have your own legacy there too.
Right. Identity with hotels has always been quite a big thing. And I guess in the past, hotels could very clearly identify themselves as A, B, or C in whatever sort of sector they wanted to play. And do you think that something like COVID has required establishments to be a little bit more agile and flexible in how they identify themselves? Or do you think that it will return much more to what it was like before COVID came along?
I think COVID just brought about the value perspective for the guests and the domestic market being able to experience properties. Ultimately, demand will determine what we do in the future from a price perspective. But those who are in luxury will want to remain as such and want to set up their product accordingly and develop their brand. And, we'll seek to improve our products. And those who are in 4-star will do similar for that property. So I think we will go back to traditionally thinking, where we position and for what type of clients. We've already seen it with the shows that have come to town and the demands that's expected. So we know that people are going to come back with an even, sharper eye. They're going to expect a lot more. And COVID isn't an excuse to slow down on your quality and where you want to be. So I think we'll quickly go back to the definition of the brands and the star ratings, and the guests will expect that.
A quick break to check in with our sponsor for this interview, RCA Consulting. RCA have been doing work in the learning and development space for the last 12 years, working with a range of different types of companies and organizations to facilitate the enhancement of their organizational culture through blended learning and performance management. To get a free needs analysis for your organization, go over to rcaconsulting.biz to find out more. Without further ado, back to the episode.
You've mentioned it a couple of times already, the importance of people in hospitality and having the right people as part of your makeup and all that. Obviously, with the challenges we've had, there's been a bit of a drain of good talent within the hospitality industry because I guess it was one of the industries most hit. What's your view on attracting the right type of talent going forward? A brand like the TAJ, which is an aspirational brand to work for. You also like to work for the kind of general managers, etc., where you're going to learn something from in one's career. What's your sort of philosophy going forward on attracting the right talent?
Look, I think we can try as well as anyone to attract talent. If the pool is very thin, we need to make different decisions and decide, well, like we did in the past, you hired for attitude and things like that. And you decide from there, how good are we to get them to the required level? I think that's what's important. We're all going to have to go back to our training boards and learning and development teams and guys like yourself and bring them in and broaden the horizon for a lot of people that haven't been exposed to it, because we'll see a lot of new people come into the industry because a lot of people left. So there is a drain. I don't think it's very different in many industries, especially if you were unfortunate to not have kept your job. It's very challenging. So, and there's been a lot of movement. So I imagine, and looking around for positions, it's been really difficult. But I think the industry is also resilient, and we'll all train staff for each other again. That's how it's always worked, So, and we are expected that we will be strong there again. That's where we need to build from the ground up again, a great training culture within the properties, and then the rest takes care of itself. It takes time, but I think once we're all doing that again, I think we will see the industry will just revive.
Yeah.
Because it is geared for lots of growth. I don't think it's at any stage anyone who's interested in this business should think, the pandemic was the pandemic. I think it is what it is. This industry is alive and well and going to flourish. Yeah.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more. You and I have often chatted about individuals, the concept of being indispensable in a company, and what distinguishes those who kind of fall by the wayside to those who kind of progress incrementally to the next level. I'm always fascinated, and I think the listeners are always fascinated to hear, whether they are in hospitality or in a different industry, what is your definition of being indispensable? You've been around so many different individuals who have either cut their teeth and made a go of it, and maybe others who haven't done as much. Is there any insight that you can give on for you through your lens, what defines someone as being indispensable in an environment like you work?
Yeah, I think everyone wants people to work with them who has a good attitude. If they have a good attitude, they can make mistakes. If they can persevere, they can make mistakes. If they have discipline, they can make mistakes. That's fine. We're not. But that's sort of the main attribute you want people to have. You want them to have the discipline and consistency. And, we used to coin a phrase, deliver what you promise. So as an individual, you've promised to do certain things. So we just need to get on with it. And if our teams can do that, then we'll be successful. And I think, So yeah, I think perseverance, discipline, right attitude is so crucial.
Right.
And then we have to keep each other in that space. Manager has to keep staff, and staff has to keep manager. And then it's, work in progress at all times. But good, healthy, challenging also works, at the end of the day. And being honest with each other about where you are in that journey, I think that's important. And then also being open that someone might not be enjoying that journey, or there's a different path they want, and you've got to work with that. But I think attitude is a great aspect.
Yeah. One of the things I've always respected working with you is you're never afraid to have the difficult conversation when it needs to be had. And, a lot of, I guess, most people in this world are a little bit conflict averse, and they don't like having the difficult conversation. I just wanted to sort of discuss that with you a little bit, in the sense of, for you, it's not to say that you enjoy the difficult conversation, but is it something which you think is inherent in your makeup, or is it something which you've really just try to force yourself to become a little bit more comfortable with over time and with experience, because you know how important it is to have that openness that you spoke about a little bit earlier?
Look, it's not, no one wants to have difficult conversations with people every day, particularly ones who are not as strong as the others, or, not as sound. So it's tough, but they are necessary, because it gives us, the barometer, and we know where we're going with the individual and how we can help and what we need to do. But I liken it again back to sports, because at the end of the day, you often had, some instances a team will have leaders everywhere on the field, and they're really difficult with each other at the end of the day, because they're seeking perfection as a team. So it isn't a one guy saying we need to be like this. It needs to be a team that challenges each other and is not afraid to say, look, you can't throw me under the bus. This is how it works. This is what we're going to do. And I always tell them, if you can't say it in this forum in front of your peers, then it's a tough one. You're always going to struggle, because people are never going to be sure what you really stand for. So I think my purpose around it is that people can be clear what my stance is. Otherwise, it's just a quiet corridor, and I don't really want that. I'd rather where I stand. And of course, you need to choose your words and do things right. But you learn as you go along. That's life. But I think always being able to say what you feel and how it works for you, and it's important. I think it's a good lesson for people to have the tougher conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of those skills that people don't spend enough time developing, just because it is uncomfortable in the beginning, and it's something which a lot of people avoid. But towards
no one wants to tell someone they're not doing so well, So it's not easy. I think over time you develop how to deliver the news, But ultimately, it's the same message, which sometimes goes on for months, even though they can see the numbers not good, So it is tough, but I think the sooner you do something, it's the same with kids. It's the same with anything you want to grow. You've got to course correct long before you get to that point.
Absolutely. Do you feel, just in terms of the relationships that you've, especially at the TAJ now, you've had quite a few long-standing staff working there and fostered some good relationships there. Do you think that that balance between the willingness and openness, as well as finding the time to recognize, but also reprimand when necessary, etc., is that a big part of why you've been able to retain good talent there?
I think it's definitely that. I think, and also, no, it's definitely a balance at the end of the day, and understanding that, it needn't always be all dramatic. It's just a straightforward, this is what it is. But I think we also move on pretty quickly. And that's another skill people need, is that they need to move on quickly from some discussions, and people keep them in their system too long. It's, so I think if you can, same with the change we had to do and be agile in this period, you actually have to forget some things very quickly so that you can move on to more positive thoughts. And so, I don't try to linger on it and carry on with something that we've had a discussion about, unless it never corrects itself. So I think it's always important to balance it out and have a healthy environment people can grow to. If they're growing, it's important, because they'll see, okay, there's cause and effect here and things, there's a benefit to staying with this group. I think that's very important. So people don't mind the discipline that comes with working, but they want to know what's in it for me, is there a long future. And I think that's what we do offer. We allow people to grow essentially into other roles, and you have to take that chance.
Mark, actually, that was a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you next, in that you found yourself in growth situations pretty much throughout your career, whether it was those difficult situations you mentioned, like at Saldanha, etc. What's been your most effective avenue for growth over your time? Is it you throwing yourself or putting your hand up for difficult situations and therefore learning in those difficult situations? Were there other ways that you could, expedite your growth? I think it's a topic which some people struggle quite a lot with, is how do I move to the next level of my career? How do I, especially in hospitality, what's the next step essentially here? I'd love you just to speak on what worked for you over your career.
There's two things here. There can be your own personal way where you take on more and you again realize you want to be indispensable, and you're willing to work long before you get the reward, and you understand that you're learning. That's important. And then a company that also sees that, and they're saying, I can see that, and we're going to give him the opportunity, in some time. And but most importantly, it's really, again, making yourself indispensable and understanding that we don't always get paid for what we do. So it's an attitude, and you have to put what you put in is what you get out. So at first, as I said, it's a personal thing. You need to have that inherent culture in yourself. Your company will recognize it, and I definitely like that from individuals, where you're not always having to say, okay, I will pay you for that day, or we'll do this. It's first an attitude. They start with that, and then of course you recognize the talent. Then so, but for me, a big part of it is really the indispensableness, and put your hand up and take on a bit more. And firstly, you're growing yourself. If you obviously run into where you're doing it far too long and it's not being recognized, that's completely different. I think that's something that you have to deal with, because we're not saying people should do much more for the company every single day, but have a sense of growth and have your own sense of worth. I think that's where it should be, but of course you will determine, when you're giving too much. I think that's also what I tell people is that, work for your value, but sometimes it does take a bit longer, and you need to understand the company's perspective too. So But don't be shy too. I gave a talk at the hotel school the other day, and the guy said, "What would you have done?" I said, "Oh, maybe I wouldn't have worked somewhere 16 years. I would only worked there 11." So because we all need to earn money, and we all need to grow, and so, but it's about knowing the right times, when to do that. It's tough, but yeah.
I think that's obviously one thing that's changed quite significantly over time is tenure has probably decreased quite a lot, for maybe a number of reasons. But yeah, it's fascinating in that now 5 years at an establishment is seen as a lengthy stint, and perhaps that wasn't always the perception. So it's interesting how those ideals are perhaps changing a little bit. But Mark, I wanted to ask you also, you've been in a number of bigger environments where things like performance management, where things like measurement are very much part and parcel of how those operations have to run because of their size and scale. We find that the smaller you go in terms of company size, the less natural things like measurement are in terms of the operation of the business. What's your stance on the importance of measurement, regardless of size? Do you think it's something which helps a business, in terms of knowing where people stand, the performance of the perception of customers, whatever the case might be? What's your feeling on measurement regardless of size?
Look, I believe you can over dialogue this, and you can make it too complex for people, and they feel quite stressed by having to, do a performance review too frequently. I think senior executives can see a number and do understand it, and obviously realize a lot sooner what type of problems they're in. But I think it should be done in a type of conversation, rather than at the end of the day, it's a very strict, rigid what are your weaknesses, what are your strengths, and all these old tools we used to use. So I think it's pretty much about open dialogue, where we, and how we position ourselves, and then manage the KRAs. We all have a common goal, so they are the same for everyone. And I think that is just instilling that purpose in everyone. It's important. But I think we make it a bit too complicated, and the systems are too rigid. I prefer to see more outside people coming in, also just to have open dialogue with the teams, and talk about performances and good culture, and those work for me. Because if it's too intense and too stressful, you don't get the required outcome anyway. Even from a good performer, it can become complicated.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you, if you could wave your magic wand, especially, and I'm talking about sort of the junior management within hospitality now, that are coming up the ranks, and maybe the future general managers, etc. If you could wave that magic wand and change one aspect about the sort of management arm that's coming up, what skill set or attribute or competency do you think is really there for the taking at the moment, that really can be improved, developed? I'm talking across the industry at large now, maybe not just in a certain sector, but where do you feel the opportunity lies for someone who's listening to this and says, well, this is really something that I can work on? Anything that you've earmarked in that sense?
Yeah, our industry is not very different to 30, 50, 60 years ago. You've got to understand this business and the service culture behind it. So we always look to people who understand the service culture and understand the guest journey, and that's what we ultimately do. Yes, you can have great business acumen. You can, have a few other skills that others don't have. But I think you need to have an inherent understanding that you're going to serve people for quite some time. This is what you will actually do all your life. Even when you get to corporate level and you're sitting in your office and you never get to leave because you snowed under in paperwork, your responses are to customers. So you've got to always respond in a serving manner. So I think we're looking for people that will come into this business and really understand that it's a service culture. And if you're good at it, you will grow. And then obviously business acumen and all of that, I think it's great. You need to have a strong sense of financial being. It's great. But service, and just have the discipline to work, because it's not a very easy industry. And food and beverage in particular in a hotel, it is long and lengthy, and it's a long day. So you will need to have a different resilience to other people.
Yeah, I think it's some great insight. Mark, for the sake of our listeners getting to know you better as well, I know you're a sports mad fan, as am I. So I feel it only right to ask you a few questions on that front. But what on the sports side really has gotten you going over the years? What sporting code and what sporting practices in particular have always caught your fancy?
I love all sports, Rob. So for me, it's pretty simple. Now you watch it more than anything else. But I loved soccer as a youngster. It was very big for me, and obviously we played a lot of cricket and a lot of rugby in schools. Right. Golf wasn't there till you could afford golf. I think that was, or you were quite connected. So and also a wonderful game, at the end of the day. But I love squash, tennis. I like all the major sports that are out there, but football is my biggest thing. I think I love the teams. I love the concept of these leagues, and now they get to spend money and build a team. So you're actually learning quite a bit about putting teams together and winning on the big stage. So, but I love it. I love all sports. Pretty easy one.
It's a fascinating study in terms of the commercialization of soccer, in terms of where it's going and the money behind it. Do you find the narrative behind that quite interesting, in terms of, you were saying how clubs are being built now into these big, brands and whatnot? I mean, it's interesting because the club's almost becoming bigger than the country in terms of the brand identity and things like that. Do you see a good, bright future for the sport in that sense?
Yeah, I think for all of the sports, I mean, even you look at Formula One, it's just going from strength to strength.
Right.
Golf has always been truly phenomenal in terms of money and prize winning and TV viewerships. So they all have their aspects, and you're watching teams build, buying and selling players, and then building your stadium. So it's very commercial, and you learn a lot of lessons in that. But ultimately, it's about 11 players you put on the field. I take a football match and a rugby, obviously some more players, and it's really the bench and this and that and how you get everyone to work together. I think it's so valuable to see this, and it's the toughest world, because it's not like you can just we can be 30 hotels on this block, but they're all striving to play in the Champions League. So only 4 out of 24 teams can play. So it's very cutthroat. People are in and people are out from a day-to-day basis. So it's fascinating. And to stay at the top, it requires money. It requires investment. I think the same in all business. If you're not continuously investing in your asset and maintaining your positioning, you can drop a step or two. So it's the same for everyone. You need to have all the tools to win,
Yeah, and I think you alluded to it a second ago, but the way that the likes of the Netflix of the world are telling these narratives now, I think for the viewer is just exceptional in terms of being able to be closer and more in touch with, I guess, the backstory and all of that, which, I think from a value perspective just increases everything exponentially. You mentioned F1, and that's a great example of what, I don't want to say a dying sport, but it was definitely stagnating to now being, on a different trajectory. So it's amazing to see how these things are coinciding.
I mean, your wife's telling you now who's driving in there, and so it's amazing. It's really opened up for everyone else, because again, the COVID situation has also it's brought the TV into our homes a lot more, and they've seen these movie companies, and so it's really a live world in your living room sort of type of thing, they play on that. So
and I think bringing it back to the hospitality space, this concept of the culture is really just a narrative that we're trying to sell to staff every day and getting them to buy into it, because I think that's, in our experience, when we see these environments that really get on with it, the guys, for better or worse, buy into I guess a unified set of beliefs and approaches. And I think that's what you guys have certainly been able to do at the TAJ, even given how difficult it's been. And I kind of want to tip the cap to you guys to say well done, because it's certainly not an easy task given the adversity that's been faced. But Mark, I've got to ask you a couple of questions as we start to end off, and that is, we always like to ask the hospitality driven individuals one question, which is, if you could only go to one restaurant for the rest of your life, anywhere in the world, which one would it be, and why would you make that choice?
Very easy, and it's going to fascinate you, but it's the Spur. because
I think I know why.
It's a 7-day a week. We all know it so well. We grew up with it. It fits everybody. It fits the family. It fits the individual. It's just 100%. It's a culture thing, and it has all the food you want. Not just because you're thinking sizzling steak but it's literally something for all occasions. So if you're saying something I can eat 7 days a week, 365 a year, it's probably only there. I don't think, I could be anywhere else, but I think that's our culture too. It's what we've always done in this country. From a kid to an adult, you're still going there.
Right. And what a success story. I mean, just being able to scale.
Yeah, unbelievable.
It's just incredible.
Unbelievable. I'm not advocating for the brand, but the thing is, it's part of our life, and it's always been like that. And I always find, the food has been as such that you can really eat what you want there. I mean, you could eat Mexican there, which was in its own strange way, eating that in South Africa, and it was always good. So it was great.
You take
family vibe.
You take me back to memories of the Salad Valley and things like that now. Which
yes, remember those days.
A proper trip down memory lane. And Mark, and sort of in closing, I guess the question we always like to ask is when all is said and done on the working career, and you kind of hang up the boots for the last day, 3 words that perhaps you'd love to hear in terms of how people have defined your career. Any 3 words that for you kind of really stick out in that sense?
I think it's 3 H's basically: hardworking, humble, honest, and consistent. I think it's something I want to take pride in. At the end of the day, that I'm consistent individual, and yeah, I think as you grow older, you want to be more humble, and you want to, but I think I've always downplay achievements and things like that. I'm not too, so I like that fact, and I think I'd like it to stay that way, so,
right.
And I'm always sort of a what you see is what you get kind of guy. So I like it like that, and I hope that's what I get remembered by, and that you had a chance to mentor quite a few people. That's also important.
Right.
It'll be good.
It's funny how so many of those traits are what we read about, and the guys that have done something significant in their industries, where consistency and humility at the same time, even whilst being ambitious, have been part of their makeup. So it's certainly some fantastic.
I think that's something that I'm learning a lot from this company, is that no matter the stature of the individual, this is passed on to us, and it's been a great 4.5 years so far, where you see that in action every day. So it's a good learning from senior executives.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been good.
Yeah, Mark. I mean, I think just to acknowledge and to thank you for your time, and to say that it's been wonderful to spend time with you and to learn from you as well in terms of your approach and outlook, even as we've spoken about in very adverse times. It's never more important to have a leader who maintains a certain degree of optimism, is realistic about things, but knows what the possibilities are, never forgets that. And I think you've exemplified that amazingly for your team, and for the people that have really needed it at a time when uncertainty was the order of the day. So I just want to convey, I think, that appreciation from all of us who also work in the industry and supply it. And it's people like that have kept the ship going in the right direction. So thank you for that strength in difficult times.
Yeah, no, and thank you, Rob. It's always good to work with companies like yourself, and where we can push the teams to greater heights and see the benefits of this collaborative. And being optimistic is key. I think we have to be optimistic, realistic, and we have to have a sense of vigor in ourselves to push the teams forward. And if you show that belief, the team will follow you. But I must say, I mean, we've got an industry full of resilient people that are really tough, and I always tell you this: we have wonderful colleagues, and they're all an inspiration to us. At the end of the day, so all these hotels that survive through these challenges, and restaurants and all of them, they've done amazingly well. It's because it's something we hope we never ever see in our life again. But it's been the biggest challenge I've ever seen. So those who were not so resilient became very resilient. So it's nice to see that people have really come out of this with that great strength of belief. So yeah, and thanks for always working well with us and our team. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to going from strength to strength.